The grand arena of Vraxen Prime stood like a mountain of black stone under 3 burning suns. Commander Jake Morris had seen many terrible things in his 15 years of space travel. But nothing prepared him for this moment. His hands pulled against the metal chains that held him to the observation platform. The chains did not move. Around him, the rest of his crew from the Liberty Star also fought against their restraints. Nobody spoke. They all knew speaking would do nothing. 3 months had passed since the Kralthan warship surrounded their small transport vessel. The Kralthans were reptilian creatures, tall and covered in dark green scales that seemed to drink in light. Their eyes were yellow and cold. They had laughed when they captured the humans. They said humans were soft creatures who thought too highly of themselves. They said humanity needed to learn its place in the galaxy. The arena below was massive, easily 200 meters across. The floor was dark sand, mixed with something that looked like crushed bone. Ancient stains marked the ground in patterns that told stories of violence spanning centuries. Thousands of alien beings filled the seats around the arena. They came from dozens of different worlds. Some had fur. Some had scales. Some were shapes that hurt to look at for too long. All of them waited for the show to begin. High Chancellor Vrektar stood on a platform across from the human prisoners. He was the leader of the Kralthan Empire, and his scales were decorated with golden bands that marked his rank. His voice boomed across the arena through speakers that made every word echo. "Today, we honor the ancient ways," Vrektar announced. His words were translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. "Today, we feed the void worm. Today, we remind all species that there are powers in this universe that demand respect, powers that existed before your civilizations drew their first breath, powers that will exist long after you are dust." The crowd responded with various sounds. Some cheered, some made clicking noises, some released chemical scents that the translation devices could not convert to meaning. Jake felt his stomach turn. He knew what came next. "The humans believed they could travel through our space without permission," Vrektar continued. "They believed their weakness would be overlooked. They were wrong. Let this be a lesson to all who forget their place." 2 Kralthan guards emerged from a tunnel. Between them walked a small figure in a white dress. Emma Hayes was 6 years old. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her feet were bare. She walked with the guards without fighting. She had learned 3 months ago that fighting only brought pain. "Emma!" Chris Hayes screamed from somewhere behind Jake. Emma's father had been the engineer on the Liberty Star. He had fixed engines and told his daughter stories about Earth every night before bed. Now his voice broke as he watched his child being led to her death. "Please, take me instead. She's just a child. Please." The Kralthan guards ignored him. They always ignored the prisoners. To them, humans were just another weak species that infested the galaxy. Nothing special. Nothing worth consideration. Jake felt Lieutenant Ben Cooper tense beside him. Ben had served with Jake for 8 years. He was a good man who never gave up. But even Ben could see there was no escape from this. The platform where they stood was surrounded by armed guards. Energy barriers hummed in the air around them. Even if they somehow broke free, they could never reach Emma in time. Emma reached the center of the arena. The guards removed her chains and stepped back quickly. One of them said something in the Kralthan language. Emma looked up at him with eyes that seemed too tired for a 6-year-old child. She nodded slightly. The guards retreated through a small door that sealed behind them with a heavy sound. The child stood alone in the center of the arena. She looked so small. The white dress moved slightly in the hot wind that blew across the sand. She did not cry. She had no tears left. 3 months of captivity had taught her that crying changed nothing. Vrektar raised one clawed hand. "Behold the price of arrogance," he declared. "Behold the fate of those who disrespect the ancient powers." A deep grinding sound filled the arena. The massive gate on the far side began to rise. Darkness waited beyond it. A darkness so complete it seemed to swallow light. The crowd fell silent. Even the most aggressive species in the galaxy knew to be quiet when the void worm appeared. Hot air rushed out from the opened gate. It carried a smell like burning metal and old death. The temperature in the arena jumped 10 degrees in seconds. Some of the alien spectators in the front rows moved back slightly. Instinct told them to retreat. Only the barriers kept them in their seats. Something moved in the darkness. Something huge. Eyes appeared first, glowing like dying stars, each one the size of a hover car. Then came the head, emerging from the tunnel like a mountain coming to life. Scales of absolute black covered every surface, each scale the size of a shield. The head alone was larger than the Liberty Star's cargo bay. Zarthok the Void Worm entered the arena. The dragon's body seemed endless as it emerged from the tunnel. Wings folded against its sides could have covered a city block. Claws that carved stone with every step left deep marks in the arena floor. The tail was still disappearing into the darkness of the tunnel when the head reached the arena's center. The dragon's breath created waves of heat that distorted the air. Jake had heard stories about void worms. Every spacer had. They were creatures from the old times, from before most species had learned to build fires. They survived in the vacuum of space. They fed on energy as much as matter. They were nearly impossible to kill. And this one had been the Kralthan's prized possession for 300 years. The dragon's eyes fixed on Emma. The child looked up at the creature that towered over her like a building. She did not run. There was nowhere to run. The arena was sealed. The guards had made sure she understood. Running only made death take longer. Zarthok moved forward. Each step shook the ground. The crowd leaned forward in their seats, anticipating the violence they came to witness. The dragon had never disappointed them before. It had consumed thousands of prisoners over the centuries. It killed quickly when it was hungry, slowly when it was bored. Either way, it always killed. Jake pulled against his chains so hard that blood ran down his wrists. Ben shouted threats at the Kralthan guards. Chris Hayes begged in a voice that barely sounded human anymore. The other crew members from the Liberty Star added their voices to the chaos. It made no difference. The Kralthans had performed this ceremony hundreds of times. The prisoners always screamed. The dragon always fed. The galaxy always remembered its place. The dragon's massive head lowered toward the small human child. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing teeth like swords. Heat poured from between those teeth. One breath of fire would end everything. Emma would not even have time to scream. But the breath did not come. The dragon stopped. Its head hovered above Emma, close enough that the child could touch it if she reached up. The ancient eyes studied her with an intelligence that made Jake's blood run cold. This was not a mindless beast. This was something far more dangerous. Emma looked up at the dragon. Her small voice somehow carried across the silent arena. "Are you lonely too?" The galaxy held its breath. The dragon did not move. Thousands of alien beings in the arena seats waited for the killing strike that always came. Seconds passed like hours. The only sound was the dragon's breathing, deep and rumbling like distant thunder. Emma stood perfectly still, her small hand still raised toward the massive creature above her. High Chancellor Vrektar leaned forward on his platform. His yellow eyes narrowed with confusion. In 300 years, Zarthok had never hesitated. The dragon killed. That was its purpose. That was what the Kralthans had trained it to do through starvation and pain and isolation. Jake Morris felt his heart hammering against his ribs. He could not understand what he was seeing. The dragon should have ended this already. Quick death was the only mercy Emma could hope for. But the dragon just stared at the child with those ancient eyes. Emma's voice came again, small but clear. "They locked me in a dark room too. It was cold and scary. I called for my daddy, but he couldn't hear me. The walls were too thick." She lowered her hand slowly. "Is that what happened to you? Did they put you in the dark?" The dragon's eyes shifted. Something changed in their glow. The heat pouring from its mouth lessened. The massive head tilted slightly. The way a confused animal might look at something it did not expect. Ben Cooper whispered beside Jake. "What is she doing?" "I don't know," Jake replied. His voice was rough. "I don't know." Emma took a small step forward. The movement made several guards reach for their weapons. but Vrektar raised a hand to stop them. He wanted to see what would happen. This was unusual. Unusual things were either valuable or dangerous. He would decide which after he understood more. "I had a cat back on Earth," Emma said, speaking to the dragon like it was a friend she met at a playground. His name was Whiskers. He was orange and white. When he got scared, he would hide under my bed. I would lie on the floor and talk to him until he felt safe enough to come out. She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I miss him. I miss home." "Do you miss your home?" The dragon's mouth closed. The sword-like teeth disappeared behind scaled lips. A sound emerged from deep in its chest. Not a growl. Something else. Something that might have been a question or might have been a response. The translation devices could not interpret it. Chris Hayes had stopped screaming. He stared at his daughter with a mixture of terror and confusion. This was not possible. Dragons did not communicate. Void worms were predators, pure killing machines that survived since before recorded history. They had no capacity for mercy or understanding. Emma reached up again. This time, her small hand actually touched the dragon's snout. The scales were hot enough to burn, but the dragon pulled its head back slightly, adjusting the heat it radiated. The child's hand rested on the black scales. She patted the dragon gently. "You're not really mean, are you?" Emma said softly. "You're just angry and sad. I get angry too when people are mean to me. The guards were mean. They pushed me and said bad words. I didn't understand. But I think you understand. I think you understand a lot." The rumbling in the dragon's chest grew louder. Its massive body settled closer to the ground. The tail, which had been raised in a threatening position, lowered slightly. The wings folded tighter against its sides. These were not aggressive postures. Jake had studied animal behavior during his military training. He recognized submission and protection signals when he saw them. Something was wrong. Or rather, something was right in a way that should be impossible. Vrektar stood up from his seat. His voice cracked through the speakers. "Guards, use the shock prods. Motivate the worm to complete its task." 4 Kralthan guards emerged from side doors carrying long poles that sparked with blue energy. These were the tools they used to train the dragon, to cause pain when it did not perform as expected. They approached the dragon from different angles, keeping their formation tight. Emma saw them coming. Her eyes went wide. "No, don't hurt him." The first guard thrust his shock prod toward the dragon's side. The blue energy crackled as it made contact with the black scales. Electricity surged through the dragon's body. Zarthok's head snapped up. A roar erupted from its throat that shook the entire arena. Several viewing screens shattered from the sound waves. Alien spectators covered their ears or whatever they used for hearing. But the dragon did not attack Emma. Instead, one massive wing swept down and covered the child completely, shielding her from the guards and their weapons. The dragon's eyes, which had been almost gentle moments before, now blazed with rage that seemed to burn reality itself. The second guard thrust his prod at the dragon's neck. The dragon's other wing swept out and knocked the guard 30 meters across the arena. The Kralthan hit the wall with a crunch and did not get up. The third and fourth guards tried to retreat, but they were too slow. A torrent of plasma fire erupted from the dragon's mouth. The fire was not red or orange. It was white and blue, burning so hot that it turned the sand beneath the guards to glass in an instant. The guards were gone. Not dead, simply gone, vaporized. The arena erupted into chaos. Alien beings scrambled over each other trying to reach the exits. The energy barriers holding them in their seats flickered and failed as the arena's power systems struggled to cope with the dragon's fury. Vrektar shouted orders that nobody could hear over the screaming and the dragon's continuous roar. Under the dragon's wing, Emma was untouched. The child looked up at the scales above her that formed a protective roof. She could feel the dragon's heart beating, massive and powerful. She could hear it breathing, forcing down the rage that wanted to burn everything. "Thank you," Emma whispered. "Thank you for not letting them hurt me." The dragon's wing shifted slightly, creating a small gap that let light in. One enormous eye looked down at Emma. In that moment, something passed between the human child and the ancient creature. Not words, something deeper. An understanding that transcended species or language. Jake finally understood. The dragon was not a mindless beast. It had never been mindless. The Kralthans had captured it, starved it, hurt it, and forced it to kill for 300 years. They had broken its will but not its mind. And now, a human child had spoken to it with kindness. A small, fragile being had asked if it was lonely, had acknowledged its pain, had seen it as something more than a monster. The dragon had made a choice. "Get ready," Jake said to Ben and the others. "When the dragon moves, we move. This is our only chance." "Chance for what?" Ben asked. "Escape," Jake said simply. The dragon's tail swept across the arena floor, destroying the guard posts and weapon emplacements that surrounded the space. Its other wing smashed into the Kralthan observation platform, where Vrektar stood. The High Chancellor jumped clear, just before the structure collapsed. He landed badly and limped toward the exit tunnel, shouting for his military commanders. Zarthok turned its attention to the main gate it had entered through. The gate was massive, made of reinforced metal, designed to contain a creature that could survive in space. The dragon lowered its head and pushed. Metal screamed. Stone cracked. The gate held for 5 seconds before the hinges shattered, and the entire structure toppled backward into the tunnel. The path was clear. The dragon turned back to where Emma still stood under its wing. It lowered its body completely to the ground and made a sound, gentle and inquiring. Emma understood somehow. She climbed up onto the dragon's back, finding holds between the scales. She settled near the base of the dragon's neck, where the scales formed a natural seat. "Emma!" Chris Hayes screamed from the observation platform. The guards had abandoned their posts. Some of the chains holding the humans had broken in the chaos. Chris had freed himself and was climbing down toward the arena floor. "Emma, hold on!" Jake broke his chains with a sharp pull. His wrists were bleeding, but he did not care. Ben and the others followed. They ran down the damaged stairs toward the arena. The dragon watched them come. Its eyes tracked their movement, but it did not attack. It was waiting. Chris reached the sand and ran toward his daughter. The dragon lowered its head, bringing Emma within reach. Chris grabbed his daughter and held her tight. "Daddy," Emma said. "This is Zar. He's my friend. He protected me." Chris looked up at the dragon. Terror and gratitude warred in his expression. "Thank you," he managed to say. "Thank you for saving her." The dragon's response was to lower its body even more. Jake understood the invitation. He did not question it. Questions could come later. Right now, they needed to move. "Everyone on," Jake ordered. "Now." The crew of the Liberty Star climbed onto the dragon's back. There was plenty of room. The dragon was the size of a building. Jake helped the others find secure positions. Chris held Emma in front of him. Ben took a position near the dragon's shoulders. The medical officer, Lisa Grant, gripped scales near the tail. When everyone was secured, the dragon stood. The movement was surprisingly smooth. It walked toward the destroyed gate, its steps deliberate and powerful. Behind them, Kralthan guards finally recovered enough to respond. Energy weapons fired from the upper levels. The shots bounced off the dragon's scales like rain. Zarthok entered the tunnel. The darkness swallowed them. Then the dragon's wings opened and began to move. Air rushed past them. The tunnel opened to the sky. The dragon launched itself upward with a force that pressed the humans flat against its back. They were free. They were flying. And the galaxy would never be the same. The sky above Vraxen Prime burned with 3 suns. Zarthok flew through the air like he had been born to it. His wings created wind patterns that knocked over smaller structures on the ground below. The humans held tight to his scales, feeling every powerful movement of the muscles beneath them. Jake Morris looked back and saw the grand arena growing smaller behind them. Black smoke rose from where the dragon had torn through its defenses. Emergency vehicles swarmed around the structure like insects. But none of them followed into the sky. They had no way to catch a void worm. "Where is he going?" Ben Cooper shouted over the rushing wind. "Away!" Jake shouted back. "That's good enough for now." The dragon's flight path took them over the capital city. Buildings rose like spears of crystal and metal below them. Millions of beings lived in that city. None of them had ever seen the void worm fly free. For 300 years, Zarthok had been a prisoner. Now he was free, and his anger showed in every movement. A Kralthan military tower stood in their path. The dragon did not go around it. His wings smashed through the upper levels, sending debris falling to the streets below. Alarms wailed across the city. The dragon roared in response, a sound of pure defiance. Emma sat near the dragon's neck, her small hands gripping the scales. Her father held her from behind, making sure she would not fall. The child seemed calm. Despite the violence and chaos around them, she leaned forward and spoke to the dragon, her words lost in the wind but her intent clear. She was encouraging him, thanking him, bonding with him. The city ended and open land stretched before them. The dragon climbed higher, his wings beating with steady power. Below them, Jake could see military vehicles racing along roads, trying to track their movement. It was useless. The dragon was faster than anything ground-based. A warning sound came from Jake's wrist communicator. The device had somehow survived 3 months of captivity. He looked at the small screen and saw red signals appearing behind them. Aircraft. The Kralthans had scrambled fighter craft. "We've got company," Jake called out to the others. Ben turned and saw the approaching fighters. There were 12 of them, sleek vessels painted in Kralthan military colors. They moved fast, closing the distance quickly. Weapons ports on their wings began to glow with charging energy. The dragon sensed the danger without being told. His flight pattern changed, becoming less direct and more tactical. He began to weave through the air, making himself harder to target. The first wave of energy blasts passed harmlessly to their left and right, but the fighters were experienced. They split into 3 groups, coming at the dragon from different angles. Their second volley was better coordinated. Several shots hit the dragon's wings and back. The humans felt the impacts through the scales they gripped. Zarthok did not seem hurt. The energy weapons that would destroy most ships barely marked his scales. But he was angry. The dragon banked hard to the left, turning to face the nearest group of fighters. His mouth opened. Jake had seen the dragon breathe fire in the arena. That had been terrifying, but that had been the dragon holding back, trying not to hurt Emma. This was different. This was the dragon at full power. The plasma stream that erupted from Zarthok's mouth was wider than the fighters themselves. It burned with colors that should not exist, white and blue and something beyond either. The 3 fighters in that group did not have time to evade. They simply stopped existing, vaporized so completely that not even debris remained. The other fighters scattered. Their pilots had trained to fight ships, not ancient predators that could breathe weapons-grade plasma. But they were brave, or foolish, or simply following orders. They regrouped and attacked again. The dragon caught one fighter in his claws as it passed too close. The metal crumpled like paper. The dragon released it, and the craft fell, trailing smoke. Another fighter came from above. The dragon's tail whipped up and struck it, sending it spinning out of control into the ground far below. Lisa Grant, the medical officer, held on near the tail and watched the battle with clinical detachment. She was noting everything. How the dragon moved. How it fought. How it protected them even while defending itself. This information would be valuable if they survived. The remaining fighters pulled back. Jake could see them circling at a safer distance. Their pilots were probably calling for reinforcements. The Kralthans would not let this go. A freed void worm was too dangerous. The humans riding it were secondary concerns now. The dragon did not chase the fighters. He turned and continued his flight path, climbing higher into the atmosphere. The air grew thinner. Breathing became harder for the humans. Emma started coughing. Chris pulled his daughter closer, trying to share his warmth and cover her mouth. Jake realized they had a problem. The dragon could survive in space. Void worms were famous for that ability. But humans needed air, and pressure, and warmth. If the dragon kept climbing, they would die just as surely as if he had killed them in the arena. "We need to go down," Jake shouted. He did not know if the dragon could understand him. "We can't breathe up here." "Down! Go down!" Emma heard him. She leaned forward and patted the dragon's neck, saying something Jake could not hear. The dragon's head turned slightly, one eye looking back at the small human who rode near his head. Then the dragon leveled off and began to descend. They were high above the ground now, well beyond the range of ground vehicles. The dragon flew for another hour, carrying them across continents at incredible speed. The three suns crossed the sky. Below them, Jake saw forests that were not trees but massive fungal growths. He saw rivers that ran purple with alien chemicals. He saw cities that lit up like circuit boards as night approached. Finally, the dragon began to descend toward a structure in the distance. As they approached, Jake recognized it. A spaceport. Not a major one, but large enough to have ships. The dragon was taking them to their way off this planet. The spaceport erupted into panic as the dragon approached. Ships launched in emergency mode, their pilots fleeing before the void worm could attack. Workers ran from the landing pads. Security forces set up defensive positions, but did not fire. Everyone knew that attacking the dragon was suicide. Zarthok landed on the largest pad with surprising gentleness. His claws barely scratched the surface. He lowered his body, and the humans climbed down. Chris carried Emma, who was exhausted from the flight. Ben helped Lisa, whose hands were cramped from holding on so long. Jake jumped down last and looked around. The spaceport was not completely abandoned. Some beings still watched from behind barriers and buildings. He saw Kralthans, but also other species. Some looked curious, some looked afraid. None approached. "We need a ship," Jake said to Ben. "Something fast that can get us out of this system," Ben pointed. "That one." It was a Kralthan military shuttle, sleek and well-armed. It had probably been preparing to chase them when the dragon appeared. The crew had abandoned it in their panic. The boarding ramp was still lowered. Jake ran toward it. Ben and Lisa followed, with Chris carrying Emma close behind. The dragon watched them go, his head turning to track their movement. When they reached the shuttle, Jake paused and looked back at the massive creature. Zarthok had saved them. He had protected Emma when he could have killed her. He had carried them away from certain death. But what now? Could the dragon even leave the planet? Would he want to? Emma wriggled free from her father's arms and ran back toward the dragon. Chris tried to stop her, but she was too fast. "Emma, no." The child ran up to the dragon's lowered head and wrapped her arms around his snout as much as she could. Her arms could barely reach a quarter of the way around. She pressed her face against the hot scales. "Thank you, Zar," Emma said. "Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for saving us." The dragon's eyes closed briefly. His breath washed over the child, warm but controlled. A rumbling came from deep in his chest. Not words, but emotion that needed no translation. Then the dragon did something unexpected. He moved toward the shuttle. His massive body walking on all four legs, he was too large to fit inside. But he positioned himself near the open ramp and looked at the humans expectantly. "I think he wants to come with us," Ben said quietly. "That's impossible," Lisa replied. "He can't fit in the shuttle." As if to prove her wrong, the dragon's body began to shimmer. The air around him bent and twisted. His form began to shrink. The process was gradual but steady. Within minutes, the creature that had been the size of a building was now the size of a large vehicle, still massive, but small enough to enter the shuttle's cargo bay if he crouched. Jake stared in disbelief. "Void worms can change size? Apparently this one can," Ben said. The dragon, now small enough to manage, walked up the boarding ramp. He had to duck his head and fold his wings tight. But he fit into the cargo area. He settled down, his eyes on Emma, who climbed up after him. The crew of the Liberty Star followed. Jake went to the cockpit and began powering up the shuttle's systems. Everything was in the Kralthan language, but ships were ships. He understood the basics. Ben joined him, working on navigation while Lisa checked the medical supplies in the shuttle's small aid station. Chris sat with Emma in the cargo bay, both of them leaning against the dragon's side. The creature's heat kept them warm. His breathing was slow and steady. Despite everything that had happened, the dragon seemed at peace for the first time since anyone had seen him. The shuttle's engines came online with a smooth hum. Jake worked the controls, closing the boarding ramp and preparing for launch. Alarms began to sound across the spaceport. The Kralthans had realized what was happening. Military forces were mobilizing. "We need to go now," Ben said, watching the tactical display fill with red markers. "Agreed," Jake replied. He pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle lifted smoothly, surprisingly responsive for a military craft. Below them, energy weapons began to fire from the spaceport defenses. The shuttle's shields held against the first few shots. Jake pointed the nose skyward and accelerated. They punched through the atmosphere in minutes. The stars appeared around them, brilliant and cold. Behind them, Vraxon Prime shrank to a point of light. Ahead was the vast darkness of space and whatever freedom they could find. The dragon stirred in the cargo bay. His size changed again, shrinking further to conserve energy. Emma stayed with him, talking quietly, keeping him calm. The bond between them was clear to everyone now. Something profound had formed in that arena, something that went beyond species or logic. Jake set a course away from Kralthan space. He did not know where they would go. He did not know if they would survive. But they were free. And they had a dragon who chose to stay with them. Behind them, the Kralthan Empire mobilized for war. The footage spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, through the quantum communication network. Someone in the grand arena had been recording when Emma touched the dragon. Someone else had captured the moment when Zarthok shielded the child from the guards. A dozen different species had filmed the escape. The dragon flying through the sky with humans on its back. Within 6 hours, every connected world had seen the images. Within 12 hours, it was the most viewed content in galactic history. The reactions varied wildly depending on who was watching. On Vraxon Prime, High Chancellor Vrektar stood in his private chamber and watched the footage for the 20th time. His scaled hands gripped the edge of his desk hard enough to crack the stone. The humiliation burned like acid in his chest. For 300 years, the Kralthans had used the Void Worm to demonstrate their power. Now, a human child had turned their greatest symbol into a traitor. His military advisors stood behind him in silence. They knew better than to speak first when the High Chancellor was in this mood. "Issue a declaration," Vrektar finally said. His voice was cold and controlled. "Humanity is declared an enemy species. All humans found in Kralthan space are to be captured or eliminated. Any species harboring humans will face economic sanctions." One advisor, braver than the others, spoke up. "Your Eminence, the other council species may not support this action. The images show the child was going to be executed. Many species will see us as the aggressors." Vrektar turned slowly, his yellow eyes fixed on the advisor. "Are you questioning my judgment?" "No, Your Eminence. I merely suggest caution. Caution is what weak species practice. We are Kralthans. We have ruled this sector for millennia. We will not be embarrassed by a child and a beast." He pointed at the screen showing Emma touching the dragon. "That creature was ours. The humans stole it. That is theft of military property. We have every right to respond with force." Unquote. The advisors said nothing more. Orders went out within the hour. Kralthan battle fleets began to mobilize across their territory. Diplomatic messages were sent to allied species, demanding support. Some responded positively. Others remained silent. On the world of Vryn, a species that had suffered greatly under Kralthan conquest, the reaction was different. The Council of Vryn elders gathered in their crystal chamber to watch the footage. Their species were tall and thin, with skin that shifted colors based on emotion. Right now, most of them showed shades of blue and green, indicating hope and determination. Elder Sana spoke first. Her voice was soft but carried weight. The child showed compassion to a creature that had every reason to kill her. The dragon chose protection over violence. These humans demonstrate qualities we value. Another elder, Tarn, nodded slowly. The Kralthans wanted to execute a child to make a point. They revealed their cruelty for all to see. This may be the opportunity we have waited for. You suggest alliance with humanity? Sana asked. I suggest we at least open communication. If the Kralthans have declared humans their enemies, then perhaps humans need friends. The Vryn Council voted. The decision was not unanimous, but it was clear. They would reach out to Earth and offer diplomatic contact. Other species who resented Kralthan dominance watched and considered doing the same. On Earth, in the capital city of Geneva, Admiral Kate Reeves sat in the war room deep beneath the United Earth Defense Headquarters. She had been in a meeting about trade routes when the footage arrived. She had ordered everyone else out of the room so she could watch it alone. She watched Emma being led into the arena. She watched the child stand alone in front of a creature from nightmares. She watched the guards try to force the dragon to kill. And she watched the dragon choose differently. By the time the footage ended with the shuttle escaping into space, her hands were shaking with rage. Admiral Reeves had served in the military for 35 years. She had fought in border conflicts. She had negotiated with aggressive species. She had seen humanity grow from a single planet to a presence in a dozen systems. But she had never felt anger like this. She activated the communication system. Get me the Security Council. All members. Now, within the hour, the most powerful humans in Earth's government gathered in the secure chamber. President Harrison, Defense Minister Chen, Intelligence Director Patel, and others. They had all seen the footage. We have been patient, Admiral Reeves began. We have been cautious. We joined the galactic community and played by their rules. We accepted being seen as a minor species. We let them think we were weak. She stood and activated the main display. Emma's face appeared, frozen in the moment before the dragon emerged. This is what our patience bought us. A 6-year-old girl fed to a monster for entertainment. The Kralthans have declared us enemies, President Harrison said. His voice was tired. They are mobilizing their fleets. Good, Admiral Reeves replied. Let them come. But first, we send a message. What kind of message? Defense Minister Chen asked. One they will never forget. The message was prepared over the next 12 hours. It was broadcast on every frequency, in every major language used in the galaxy. Admiral Reeves herself delivered it, standing in full military uniform in front of the Earth flag. This is Admiral Kate Reeves of the United Earth Defense Force. By now, you have all seen the footage from Vraxen Prime. You have seen the Kralthan Empire attempt to execute a 6-year-old human child for the crime of existing. You have seen their guards try to force a captive creature to commit murder for entertainment. Her expression was cold and hard. Let me be clear. Humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. Any species, any government, any individual who harms human children will face consequences beyond your comprehension. The display changed behind her, showing military facilities that had been kept secret. Weapons, platforms in orbit around Earth and its colonies. Ships unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, sleek and dangerous. Weapons tests showing destructive capability that rivaled anything the major powers possessed. We have been patient because we chose to be, not because we had to be. We have played the role of minor species because it suited our purposes to be underestimated. That ends today. The display changed again, showing the footage of Emma and the dragon. But I want the galaxy to see something else. Watch this child. Watch her show compassion to a creature that could have killed her instantly. Watch the dragon, the so-called mindless beast, recognize that compassion and choose to protect her. Admiral Reeves leaned forward. A 6-year-old human child demonstrated more wisdom and honor than the entire Kralthan government. A creature that had been tortured for 3 centuries recognized kindness when he saw it. If a dragon can show such wisdom, what does it say about civilizations that cannot? Humanity extends an offer. To any species that shares our values, that believes children should be protected, that thinks compassion matters more than power. We offer friendship and alliance. To any species that sides with the Kralthans in this matter, we offer one chance to reconsider. Her expression hardened. To the Kralthan Empire specifically, we say this. You wanted to teach us our place in the galaxy. Lesson learned. Now, we will teach you yours. The broadcast ended. The galaxy was silent for approximately 30 seconds. Then, every communication channel exploded with activity. Some species condemned humanity for aggressive posturing. Others quietly sent diplomatic messages expressing support. Many simply waited to see what would happen next. On the stolen shuttle, now 3 days into their flight through neutral space, Jake Morris received the broadcast. He was in the cockpit with Ben when Admiral Reeves's message played. When it ended, both men sat in silence. We're going to war, Ben finally said. Maybe, Jake replied. Or maybe we just changed the rules of the game. In the cargo bay, Emma was curled up against Zarthok's side. The dragon had shrunk to the size of a large horse to fit more comfortably. His scales were warm and his breathing steady. Chris sat nearby, watching his daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in months. Lisa Grant was checking medical supplies when Admiral Reeves's message reached them. She listened carefully and then smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just seen justice begin to take shape. The galaxy wanted to see humans as weak, she said to Chris. They just found out how wrong they were. Chris looked at his daughter sleeping against the dragon. Emma just wanted to be kind. She didn't mean to start anything. Kindness is the most revolutionary act there is, Lisa replied. Especially in a galaxy that runs on fear and power. The shuttle continued through space, heading toward human territory. Behind them, the Kralthan Empire prepared for conflict. Around them, the galaxy chose sides, and everywhere, people watched the footage of a small girl and an ancient dragon and asked themselves which side of history they wanted to stand on. Messages poured into Earth from unexpected sources. The Salkari Consortium sent formal complaints about the treatment of the child, breaking their long trade relationship with the Kralthans. The Minari clans, typically neutral, offered to provide safe passage for human ships through their space. Even some minor Kralthan colony worlds sent secret communications suggesting they did not support their government's actions. The tide was turning. Not because of military might or economic pressure, but because a 6-year-old girl had asked a dragon if it was lonely. Because that dragon had chosen mercy. Because humanity had stood up and said that some things mattered more than power or profit. High Chancellor Vrektar watched his carefully built alliances begin to crack. He sent more threats. He mobilized more ships. He promised retribution. But his voice sounded hollow now. The galaxy had seen behind the mask. They had seen the cruelty that powered the Kralthan Empire, and many of them decided they had been complicit long enough. On the shuttle, Emma woke up and yawned. She patted the dragon's side and smiled. We're going home soon, aren't we? Zar? The dragon's rumble was gentle, almost like a cat's purr. Emma took that as a yes. She settled back against the warm scales and closed her eyes. She felt safe. After 3 months of fear and darkness, she finally felt safe. Outside the shuttle's windows, the stars shone bright and cold, witnesses to everything that had happened and everything that was yet to come. The Galactic Council Station floated in neutral space, a massive structure that had been built over thousands of years. It was shaped like a wheel with 1,000 spokes, each spoke representing a different member species. The central chamber could hold representatives from every recognized civilization in the galaxy. Today, it was full. The emergency session had been called by 3 different species simultaneously. The Kralthan Empire demanded justice for the theft of their property and the humiliation of their ceremony. The Vryn Collective demanded an investigation into the attempted execution of a child. The Minari clan simply wanted the truth to be established before war spread across the sector. High Chancellor Vrektar arrived with an escort of 30 warships. He took his place on the Kralthan platform with confidence. He had prepared his arguments carefully. The humans had violated multiple laws. They had stolen military property. They had damaged Kralthan facilities. By any legal standard, they were criminals who deserved punishment. Across the chamber, The Vryn delegation sat in their seats, their skin colors cycling through patterns that indicated concern and hope. Elder Sana led them, her long fingers folded in her lap. She said nothing as the chamber filled. She was waiting. The other species took their positions. The Salkari, who looked like massive beetles with too many legs. The Reni, who were clouds of gas contained in force fields. The Tolar, who resembled Earth's octopuses but with crystal bones. Hundreds of species, thousands of representatives, all gathered to judge humanity. The human delegation arrived last. Jake Morris had not expected to be part of it. He was just a transport captain, not a diplomat. But Admiral Reeves had been clear. The crew of the Liberty Star would tell their story. They had lived it, they would present it. Jake wore his best uniform, cleaned and repaired as much as possible after 3 months of captivity. Ben Cooper stood beside him, along with Lisa Grant and Chris Hayes, and between them, holding Jake's hand on one side and her father's on the other, was Emma Hayes. She wore a simple blue dress that someone from Earth's diplomatic corps had sent. Her hair was brushed and pulled back. She looked like any 6-year-old girl going to an important event. Behind the human group, something massive moved through the station's corridors. Zarthok had returned to his full size for this occasion. The dragon was too large to fit in the council chamber, but he waited in a specially prepared bay nearby. His presence was transmitted through holographic projection, a massive image of his head and eyes visible to everyone present. The council speaker, a being called Wrath, whose species had held the position for 3 generations, raised one crystalline appendage. The sound of a deep bell rang through the chamber, calling everyone to silence. "We are gathered to address the incident on Vraxon Prime," Wrath announced. His voice was translated simultaneously into every language. "The Kralthan Empire has brought charges against humanity. The Vryn Collective has brought charges against the Kralthan Empire. We will hear both sides." Vrektar stood. His yellow eyes swept the chamber with practiced authority. "The humans violated our sovereignty. They entered our space without proper authorization. When they were captured according to established law, they damaged our property, killed our guards, and stole a creature of immense value. The dragon Zarthok was legally ours, captured and maintained under ancient salvage rights. Its theft represents an act of war." He activated a display showing the arena's destruction. "Look at the damage. Billions in repairs. Dozens dead. All because these humans refused to accept legitimate punishment for their crimes." "Legitimate punishment?" Jake Morris stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chamber. "You were going to feed a 6-year-old child to a dragon for entertainment." "Correction," Vrektar replied coldly. "We were performing a traditional ceremony that has maintained order in this sector for centuries. The child was selected because your species needed to learn humility. You humans act as if you belong among the established powers. You do not. You are newcomers. Weak. Insignificant. The ceremony would have taught you reality." Emma squeezed Jake's hand. He looked down at her and nodded slightly. She let go of both hands and walked forward, her small shoes making soft sounds on the chamber floor. Several species leaned forward to see the child who had touched a dragon. She stopped in the center of the speaking area and looked up at all the alien faces surrounding her. "My name is Emma," she said. Her voice was small but clear. The chamber's acoustic systems carried it perfectly to every ear and sensor. "I'm 6 years old. I like drawing pictures and playing with my cat. I miss my home on Earth." She turned slowly, looking at all the different species. 3 months ago, the Kralthans took my daddy's ship. They said we broke their laws. They put us in dark rooms with no windows. They didn't give us enough food. They said mean things I didn't understand." Her voice did not waver. She had lived through too much to be scared now. "Then they took me to the big arena. They told me a monster was going to eat me. They said it was to teach humans a lesson. I was really scared. But then I saw Zar. And he wasn't a monster. He was just lonely and sad like me." Emma pointed to the holographic projection of the dragon. "Zar could have eaten me in one bite. But he didn't. I asked if he was lonely too, and he understood. He protected me when the guards tried to hurt us. He saved all of us. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. She looked directly at Vrektar. You kept him in a dark place. You hurt him and starved him and made him kill people he didn't want to kill. That's mean. That's really, really mean. The chamber was completely silent. Emma walked back to her father, who picked her up and held her close. She had said everything she needed to say. Jake stepped forward again. We have evidence. Recordings from the Liberty Star that show we had proper authorization to travel through that space. Our permits were legitimate. The Kralthans detained us on false charges. He activated his own display, showing documents and communication logs. But more than that, we have evidence of what the Kralthan Empire has been doing for centuries. Not just the feeding ceremonies, but everything else. The display changed, showing files that Lisa Grant had found on the stolen shuttle's computer. The Kralthans had kept detailed records of their activities, never imagining someone would steal a military shuttle and access them. The chamber watched as the evidence played. Not just records of the feeding ceremonies, but documentation of kidnappings across multiple species, genetic experiments, slave labor camps, systematic torture of prisoners. The Kralthan Empire had built itself on suffering, and they had documented everything with bureaucratic precision. Species after species reacted as they recognized members of their own kind in the records. The Reni saw clouds of their people trapped in collection jars. The Salkari saw their own species forced to fight each other for entertainment. The Toller saw experiments that had killed hundreds of their young. Vrektar tried to speak, to defend his civilization's actions as necessary for maintaining order. But his voice was drowned out by the growing noise in the chamber. Species that had been silent allies of the Kralthan Empire now shouted questions and accusations. The carefully maintained facade of respectability cracked and shattered. The council speaker rang the bell again, calling for order. It took several minutes for the chamber to quiet. When it did, Wrath spoke carefully. We will now hear from the dragon. The holographic projection of Zarthok grew brighter. The dragon's voice came through speakers, translated by technology the humans had helped develop. It was the first time most species had heard a void worm speak. I am Zarthok, the dragon said. His voice was deep and ancient. I have existed for 7,000 years. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have survived in the void between stars. 300 years ago, the Kralthans found me injured and weak. I thought they would help me. Instead, they imprisoned me. The dragon's eyes, visible through the hologram, blazed with remembered pain. They starved me until I would kill to eat. They hurt me until I would attack, to make the pain stop. They forced me to consume beings who begged for mercy. For 3 centuries, I was their slave, their weapon, their symbol of power. His gaze fixed on the spot where Emma stood with her father. Then a human child asked if I was lonely. She saw me as a person, not a monster. She touched me with kindness when I had known only cruelty. In that moment, I remembered what I had been before the Kralthans broke me. The dragon's voice grew harder. The Kralthans claim I was their property. I was never property. I am a living being. The humans freed me. They showed me more honor in one act than the so-called civilized galaxy showed in 300 years. I choose to stay with them. I choose to protect the child who saved me. Vrektar stood again, desperate to regain control. This is irrelevant. The law states that... The law? Elder Sana of the Vryn stood, her skin flashing red with anger. You speak of law, after we have seen your crimes? You would execute a child, and call it ceremony? You would enslave a sentient being and call it property? Other species began to stand. The Minari clans, the Salkari consortium, even some of the smaller species that had never spoken in council before. One by one, they voiced their condemnation of the Kralthan Empire. The vote was called, not a vote on sanctions against humanity, but a vote on the Kralthan Empire's actions. The council speaker presented the motion. Should the Kralthan Empire face investigation and potential sanctions for crimes against sapient beings? The vote was not even close. Only the Kralthan's most dependent allies voted against it. Even some Kralthan colony worlds, represented by their own delegates, voted yes. The empire that had dominated the sector for millennia was now facing judgment from the galaxy it had terrorized. Vrektar stood in his platform, his scales pale with rage and shock. "You will regret this," he hissed. "The Kralthan Empire will not forget." He stormed from the chamber, his guards following. Several Kralthan warships broke formation and left the station. But others remained, officers who had seen the evidence and decided they could not serve such a government, colony representatives who chose the council over the empire. The chamber slowly emptied as species departed to consider what they had witnessed. Jake Morris stood with his crew and Emma, feeling exhausted and surreal. They had come expecting to defend themselves. Instead, they had changed the galaxy. Elder Sana approached them, her skin now showing shades of blue and gold. "Your daughter showed great courage," she said to Chris. "She showed kindness," Chris replied, holding Emma close. "That's all she did." "In a galaxy like ours, kindness is the greatest courage," Sana replied. She bowed slightly to Emma. "Thank you, small one. You reminded us of what we should be." Over the following weeks, the galaxy transformed. The Kralthan Empire fractured as colony worlds declared independence. Species that had suffered in silence began sharing their stories. The Council established new laws about the treatment of sentient beings. Laws that had teeth and enforcement mechanisms. Humanity's status changed overnight. No longer seen as weak newcomers, they were recognized as a species that valued life and dignity above power. Alliance offers came from dozens of civilizations, trade agreements, cultural exchanges, requests for Earth's help in rebuilding worlds damaged by Kralthan rule. Jake Morris and his crew returned to Earth as heroes. Admiral Reeves met them personally at the spaceport. Emma ran down the shuttle's ramp and stopped at the sight of all the people waiting. Her cat, Whiskers, was there in her mother's arms. Emma had not seen her mother in 3 months. Behind the shuttle, Zarthok emerged in a smaller form. The dragon was the size of a large vehicle now, small enough to walk among humans without causing damage. He followed Emma as she ran to her mother, staying close but not intrusive. He was her protector, her friend. And that would never change. The footage of their arrival was broadcast across the galaxy. Species everywhere saw the dragon walking peacefully beside the human child, saw the reunion of a family torn apart, saw what happened when compassion triumphed over cruelty. The incident became known as the Dragon's Choice. Schools taught it as a lesson in ethics. Diplomats referenced it in negotiations. Artists created works inspired by it. And everywhere, when someone needed to explain why kindness mattered, they told the story of Emma Hayes and Zarthok. Years later, Emma would grow up to become a diplomat herself, working to build bridges between species. Zarthok stayed with her family, choosing to live on Earth and serve as an advisor to humanity's government. His ancient wisdom, combined with his fierce protection of those he loved, made him invaluable. But sometimes, late at night, Emma would sit with the dragon under Earth's single moon and talk with him like she had in the arena. They would remember that day when everything changed, when a small act of compassion shook the galaxy, when a dragon chose mercy, when the silence that followed spoke louder than any words ever could. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Not the lesson the Kralthans intended, but a far more important one. A civilization that cannot protect its children, that cannot show kindness to those in pain, that values power over compassion, does not deserve to call itself civilized, and the galaxy would never forget.